Hi, everybody. In this video, we're going to be doing this Miles Morales bust from the Spider-Verse movies. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to learn a lot of stuff. So turn on Blender and let's get going. All right. Welcome to this episode of Blender Basics. This one isn't so basic. We're doing a Miles Morales bust. So here I have a head that I've made previously to use as a reference. So here's our model here. And on our left, we have the front and the profile views of the model. And I also have a blockout version that just shows you the basic forms of this head. And it's going to be included in the file. So we're going to get rid of the blockout and we're going to keep the regular head to use as reference from time to time. Let's get started. We're going to put a UV sphere, and that's going to represent our cranium and our face at the same time. We'll shape it to look like the cranium and the face. So I'm just getting this thing positioned, stretching it on the Z axis to make it a bit taller. Now we're going to go into the profile. I'm going to set the transformations that I just made in a second. Here we go. Set the transformations. Go to sculpting mode, turn on X symmetry so that it's symmetrical. And now I'm going to shape the head using the grab brush. So pulling it out a little bit, as you can see. There we go. I'm trying to pull out the muzzle of the mouth a little bit, as we can see there. And I'm pushing back behind the jaw to sort of define the jaw. And now from the front, you're going to see it looks much too wide, like a basketball, but I'm going to squish it horizontally. Got my front view. And Miles's head is pretty narrow, so I have to make it quite narrow. And then I'm going to be cutting off the sides of the head a little bit to have room for the ears. So there we go. The first time, it's too much. Just a little bit like that. There we go. And when you do this, it often creates a face set. So to make it work properly, I just select face set from visible. So now I'm really just going to smooth it out a little bit, and I'm going to just keep sculpting with my grab brush, just keep trying to get that skull shape to be okay. Turning it on the side. Now I'm going to carve a little bit under where the lower lip is going to be, just to kind of separate the mouth and the chin. Smooth it a little bit. And soon there we go, I'm going to define the area where the eyes are going to be. Miles has a very kind of noticeable plane change under his brow, as you can see there in the picture, this kind of shadow. So I'm also just kind of emphasizing a bit of the skull shape, and I carved in behind where the ear is going to be as well. Pushing the back of the head in because it was a little bit too deep. All right, now I'm going to add a neck, just to give myself an idea of what this is going to look like as a whole. So there's our really just a cylinder, and I'm tilting it, of course, because the neck is not straight. It goes at a bit of an angle. And now with these two, I can kind of start to work it, making the neck a bit thicker and working both the cranium and the neck to kind of just get a basic thing. All right, right here you see that suddenly the head looks different. What I have done is I've added a subdivision surface modifier at one level, and I've applied it. So the head now has twice as many polygons, and it's smoother. I also dug in the eye sockets a bit, as you see. The eye sockets are a bit deeper. So now I'm continuing, and now I'm making an area for where the hair is going to be. Now Miles's hair is really huge, so it's a kind of an important part of the look is to have that kind of ball of hair. Now at first it just looks kind of stupid. It looks a little bit like Beavis and Butthead, but at least it just gives me the height of his head to some extent. It's a little bit easier to understand. So I'm just kind of shaping the basic shape of his hair. Is kind of high top there, and once it sort of looks like something, I'm going to keep moving on the rest of the head. So now I have just kind of keep looking at it, pulling out the ball of the mouth a little bit, pulling back the side of where the eyes are so that there's enough room to put the eye in, and smoothing it up a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to put a nose in. So I've used a sphere to represent the ball of the nose, and I'm going to squash it down vertically the z-axis, as you're going to see here, just to make it look more like a ball of a nose. And I'm positioning it on the side to make sure it comes out enough, and at least trying to get it positioned as best I can. Now I just duplicated it, and I'm going to use that for the bridge of the nose. And I'm looking at the side. What I'm going to do is, once it looks okay, see, I'm doing all of this in object mode, all this rotation. Once it's okay, I'll set the transformations, go to sculpt mode, turn on X symmetry, of course, and just use the grab brush to kind of push it into the right position. So this is the bridge of the nose, a different piece. Now when I go to the front, it's probably too wide, yes. And so I'll try to kind of get the basic shape of his bridge. It up a little bit. And I'll go between these pieces. If I press Alt Q, I can go to that piece. Oops, I had not set symmetry. So I'll set it and make sure, symmetrize it. And now that it's set, I can keep working on it. Always turn on X symmetry. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate that nose again and make the wing of the nose. So that's the wing of the nose. Pushing it around, it's obviously too wide. All of this in object mode, and of course, apply transformations. Remember, anything you do in object mode, apply the transformations. Now I mirrored it, and I can go and move it around in edit mode or in sculpt mode. So in edit mode, I'll just push it in a bit. Sculpt mode. Moving so I can go between the different parts and just kind of move them around. So obviously the nose isn't anywhere near done, but I've just kind of had a position of a nose there, and now I can add an ear. So this is an ear, a cylinder that has been squashed down on the z-axis. Now I'm going to form a basic shape of an ear. This looks like a hockey puck now, but it will ultimately look like an ear. Remember, the ear goes generally between the eyebrow and the nose. That's the basic position. Miles's are a tiny bit high in his head, but it's still pretty much that. And I'm just going to rotate it and move it into the right position until it's okay. I just did a rotate Z to push it back. Now I set the transformations once again, went to sculpt mode, and I'm just pulling it around just to kind of get the basic shape. Now I set my transformations again just to be sure, and I mirrored it. All right, so now that I've mirrored it, I'm going to go back to the hair, move the hair around a little bit with the grab brush. And now I went back to the face, and one thing I'm going to do is put another subdivision surface modifier on after I push down the eyes a little bit, pushing down the eyes, and then I realize I need more geometry. Instead of remeshing it, I go for the subdivision surface modifier, as you'll see in a second. Subdivision surface, and apply it. This gives me more geometry. I didn't remesh it because I want to keep that straight edge loop of the mouth because soon I'm going to be working on the mouth. In fact, right now. So I take the draw sharp brush, and because I have the nice edge loops there, I can make a kind of a clean line. And I basically draw the lip line. And now I take the flatten contrast brush and basically sort of sand down that plane of the upper lip with the flatten contrast brush, which I put as a shortcut to 3. Now, you're going to see when it turns to the side, you want to have this profile of the lip where it's going out further at the corner of the lip and then back down to the fleshy part of the lip. So now it's too straight. So I'm going to just kind of sculpt it so that the lip comes out where instead of going a straight vertical line, it's going to be going out towards the basically beginning of the lip and then back down. So I kind of take my grab brush and just push it out so that it's more rounded. So it's not just a flat thing from the bottom, more of a muzzle shape. And now with the draw brush, I'm just kind of pushing out the lower lip a little bit. And then I'm going to pretty much take the grab brush and just move it back. Get the lower lip in the right position or approximately the right position. So there's just the grab brush. Making the cupid's bow for the upper lip, although his upper lip doesn't have much of a cupid's bow in it. So it's going to end up being quite straight. go. Just trying to sort of get the approximate position of the upper lip and maybe moving the corners a bit up. And in a moment, I'm going to jump back to the nose. And I'm going to merge all the pieces of the nose together. So that's what I'm doing here. I take all the nose, I go to Object and Convert to Mesh. This applies all of the modifiers. And now I just joined everything together. Control J, join them. So the nose is now all one big piece. So now I can kind of just push it all together in edit mode or sculpt mode. The nose is still separate from the rest of the head though. I will eventually join it to the head. Okay, so I'm just moving the nose around, keeping it in this kind of these blocky shapes. And I'm going to add an eyeball. Rotate 90 degrees on the x-axis so that the round part is facing us. That's going to allow us to make the pupil and the iris. See, now the pupil is facing us. That was because we rotated it 90 degrees on the x-axis. Putting it into the head, trying to get the right depth, which is not easy to do. And you see that the eyes are actually too far up in the head. And I'm going to fix that later. Now that the eyes are kind of roughly positioned, I go back to the actual head and I carve around the eye to give it basically so that the eye is sitting in its socket. Carving down on the sides of the cheeks, basically. A little bit more around the eye. And I'm pushing out a little bit of the flap of the skin that covers the eye. What I'm trying to do is get the eye seated in the skull properly. And I'm going to push back the forehead a little bit. Mirroring the eye. The transformations have been applied so I can mirror the eye. And now I'm realizing that the eyes are a bit too high. So I'm going to move everything down slightly, as you're going to see. A little bit across, and well, not that much down. A little bit more down. Now that the eyes are down, I have to do the same thing with the face because now my face is too high. The kind of Lone Ranger mask region. So what I'm doing is I'm masking off that whole section of the face, invert the mask, and I'm going to pull it down slightly. There we go. So remember, at any point, if you notice that the proportions are wrong or their positions are wrong, if the thing is sculpted okay, you can always move things around like I just did. I'm also moving the chin back a little bit, and I'm just noticing that the muzzle of the mouth should be out more relative to the chin. So that's what I'm doing there. And probably the forehead's a little bit too flat. So I'm just kind of rounding it off a little bit so it looks a little bit more round. Pushing the temples back a bit to give it a bit more roundness. And making sure that he has those very sharp temples like Miles does. Okay, he also has this kind of cut on his cheek, so I'm doing that again with the flattened contrast brush. The flattened contrast brush is great for making these kind of planar shapes. Then I take the pinch brush, and that can kind of raise that edge so it just gets a bit more of an emphasis. Now I guess I'm making him look more happy by raising the sides of the mouth. Okay. Smoothing it a tiny bit. Carving in that little divot for the upper lip. Checking it with another matte cap just to see how it looks in that position or in that different lighting. All right, I'm moving the ears down a little bit because they were too high. And I think at this point, I'm probably going to get ready to start merging all these parts together. I applied the transformations because I moved stuff in object mode. I'm going to go back, push down the hair a little bit more because it was a bit too high. So now he's going to look a little bit less like Beavis and Butthead. Smoothing it out a little bit. You notice I go back and forth on different parts of the head just to kind of make it look okay. I'm not really, I'm getting one section okay, but I'm still going back and forth. Whenever I see something that bothers me, I just go and I fix it. Now my dog is sad. but that's okay because she's quite happy. Remeshing the hair. The first time I've actually remeshed it. And now I'm just working a bit more on the hair. All right, go to the nose, and I'm getting ready to, uh, went to edit mode to push those nostril wings in a little bit. Because it's all separate pieces, you can literally just move the nostril wings in edit mode. It makes it a lot easier. Here we go. I'm joining them together. I just joined the neck and the face together, and I realized it needs to be quite densely remeshed to make it work okay. So now the neck and the head are remeshed, and it looks god awful. But I'm using a very powerful smoothing brush and uh, getting the skull shape already. And you're going to see that it does look very weird because he has no nose. But I'm going to fix the skull shape as I'm doing it since I noticed that it looked so terrible. Even though he has hair, I still want it to look not terrible as a skull. So I noticed a couple things. I need to make the temples a bit less wide. I adjust the ears a little bit. But most importantly, what I'm about to do is I'm going to combine everything together. In fact, I'm going to take the nose, the ears, and the face and join them all. First of all, I'm going to convert them all to a mesh. This basically applies the mirror modifier. Then I'm going to Control J, join all those pieces together, go to sculpt mode, and I'm going to remesh it. And I do it at a pretty high resolution, 0.01. Now I'm going to go and basically blend these sections together. So use a very low smoothing brush so I don't kill everything. And then basically just smooth those parts together and make sure I have my asymmetry. I think I resymmetrize it after. Now I just go and I smooth everything just to get it to kind of look nice. And now I can kind of be more mindful about the joins of these sections. But at least I have kind of distinct shapes. Now I'm going in the mouth with my crease polish brush and just getting that lip line. And I'm giving him a bit of a smile. Pushing it down a little bit. Going up to the nose with the draw sharp brush and basically getting in some preliminary nostrils. And then I'm going to go a little bit under the lower lip. And now here I'm just adding a little bit of clay, or I'm using the draw brush to kind of fill in a little bit of the skull shape. Smoothing it, just kind of looking around. And now I think it's time to draw in some of the ears. So you notice that the ears are still not joined to the head. I didn't choose to join them yet. I'm going to join them after I finish kind of roughing out the ear. So I'm really just using the draw brush to, get the basic geometry. It's still super low poly, as you can see. At some point, I'm going to remesh it because I'm sort of like, well, there we go. Because there was no way I could continue with this ultra low poly business. And then I'm really just using the draw brush to kind of shape the ear here and smoothing it a little bit, as I go. And just the grab brush to kind of adjust the contours of things and everything like that. And it's, again, like I said, super low poly. Whoops, I squashed it in a weird way. So I'm going to push that back. Um, I used a bit of the pinch brush for a second to kind of push those two sections together. And now what I'm going to do is, well, continue to just kind of work the ear. So Miles doesn't really have very realistic ears in the cartoon, but I guess I just decided to do it. Converting these ears to a mesh means I'm applying the modifiers. Finally, now I selected the head and the ears, and I press Control J to join them. So the ears are now joined to the head, and I'm going to once again remesh the whole thing at 0.01. So there we go. The ears are finally attached to the head. I'm going to go probably with a very low, smooth brush. There we go. I figured that I was going to do that. Turn down the heat, turn down the strength of the smooth brush and just kind of get the ear to be smoother now that it's in a higher poly count. Solo the head in a second and just get to the back of the ears. Sometimes there's some gaps, so what I'll probably do is remesh it after. Yeah, there we go. Remesh it kind of sometimes takes care of the gaps. Okay, now the shapes are starting to look okay. I just think I forgot to turn on my screencast keys there. So I'm just taking the grab brush and kind of pushing things around, trying to give his face a bit more of the roundness that Miles has. There we go. And notice that there's no lids yet. I'm still just working on it with no eyelids. I will add the eyelids pretty soon. What I'm doing now is just using the flattened contrast brush to kind of shape the planes around his eyes. And inflating or a little bit of the cheeks, giving a little bit of clay buildup just to kind of get the planes better. That's the clay buildup. And then I use the pinch magnify. Clay strips, not clay buildup. I use the clay strips. That just gives a bit more fleshiness to his cheeks. So that's what I'm doing there. A little bit of clay strips and then smoothing it. And he has those kind of exaggerated planes on his sides of his face, so I'm just kind of giving him a bit of those planes. Emphasizing his, well, smoothing his jaw a little bit. Let's see what I'm doing now. And I'm just using the pinch magnify to kind of emphasize those planes. And my dog is still quite sad in the background, but, she's okay. Right? Just carving in a little bit on the sides of the lips where the kind of smile line is. There's always a bit of a depression there. And just emphasizing the nose, the shape of the nose, and that little divot under the nose, and the crest of the upper lip. Right, pushing it in a little bit. And this part is really just kind of going, looking at it, shaping it. And I also have some reference of the actual Miles because my version wasn't that close. And so I'm looking at the actual real Miles Morales, or the real concept, not the real thing. There is no real thing. He's a fake character. But I'm looking at the concept. All right, I think I've decided it's time to make the eyelids. So let's see what I do here. I'm going to duplicate the eyes. This duplicate is going to be the eyelid form. And I'm going to push this eyelid form slightly ahead on the y-axis. I'm also renaming stuff, so I just have, I actually have the names of things. So this is the head. That's the actual eye. So then there's my hair. All right. So let's look at the eyelid forms. I'm going to move them up ahead for the y-axis so they're in front of the eyes. And I'm going to use this form to make eyelids in my amazing trick. Rotate on the x-axis, and what you're trying to do is to get an edge loop that represents the edge of the upper eyelid, as you're going to see. See, these loops are going to represent the upper eyelid. I'm removing the backs of these with the subtract selection and the lasso selection so that I can just only have the front of the eyelids. And this little strip here, once I duplicate it, there we go, and separate it, is going to be the upper eyelid, as you can see. And of course, it's just a strip, but at least that strip is a very strong, it has a nice clean edge to it, and I can just manipulate it with the grab brush to do lids that are pretty clean. So what I just did there is I put a solidify modifier to give the lids a little bit of thickness. Okay, now I have switched to the eyes. I'm going to create a shape key for the eyeballs because I'm actually going to create a depression for the irises. So I've created a one shape key for the irises and I'm turning the value all the way up. And this is going to be where I put in basically an extra loop and push the iris back. And it's called iris and pupil. That's the name of my shape key. So I'm going to select, well, it's still on subtract, buddy. Better change it. The iris and the pupil. And I noticed that if this was just the iris, it would be a little bit too small. So I decided to make an additional edge loop because that is too small of an iris, even once the lids are added. So there we go. I add another little edge loop, and that's going to be the outer part of the iris. And I select these edge loops, and I'm going to just extrude this whole thing back. Now, there's still skin there of the head. That's why it looks weird. And that's way too far back. So I move them, I do it again, and I just move them maybe like that. Now I'm just going to extrude the pupil. There we go. Now I put this back in object mode, put on shade auto smooth, and add a bevel modifier with two segments. And I just turned that amount down a bit to get rid of that weird shading artifact. And now it looks much better. I'm going to still adjust the size of the iris and the pupil after because they're a little bit too big, but we'll see. We'll see once we add the eyelids. All right, let's sculpt the eyelids a little bit. Miles's eyes are very kind of classic almond shaped. They have a very strong angle, almost straight vertical at the corner, and then they go up on the edges. They're much higher on the outer corners than they are on the inner corners, as sort of a cartoon almond eye. So I push those outer corners up. Notice that inner corner is very straight looking. Well, I make it a bit more straight. And now I'm going back to the skin. Now that the eyelid's there, and I can kind of inflate the skin around the eyelid so that so you don't see that much of an eyelid. He doesn't have huge prominent eyelids. I'm adding the clay strips to basically build up the skin around the eyes. Pushing it back a little bit, the grab brush. Probably add a little bit more in the corner there, in the inner corner. Make sure my screencast keys are on because they were off. And I'm just looking at the eye from different angles with the grab brush, just moving things around a little bit. Switching back to the eyelids. Pulling that outer edge out and raising it a little bit. And just adjusting the eyelids. But having the eyelids being separate is a great way to do it because then you can really adjust them properly. All right, I brought back my eyelid forms, and I'm going to do the lower lid. Remember, these are not the eyes. These are the eyelid forms. Notice that they also don't have any iris in them. They're just blanks. So now I selected bottom loops. And I'm going to cut the back off. And I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to separate it. Exactly the same technique as before. And now I have lower lids. And I'm going to shade auto smooth and add a solidify modifier to give them some thickness. I guess I just did it again. There we go. Now I'm going to go into sculpt mode and basically push them down. And I think I noticed that my solidify is too strong. There we go. So it was too thick. So I'm just adjusting those eyelids. And you're going to see that now I'm going to bring the skin on the bottom of the face way more up because there's much too much of a lower eyelid. It's pretty obvious. He doesn't have huge eye bags. So we're going to bring the skin a bit forward. We're also going to move the lower eyelid back a little bit. Upper eyelid forward. And the upper eyelid is always further ahead than the lower one. So now I'm just taking an inflate brush and inflating the skin of the cheek pretty large so that it goes, it actually gives him in front of the eyelid because his eyelids aren't that big. And now you're going to see what I'm going to do is now that the skin is inflated, I'm going to take a mask and mask off all the skin behind the eye. Make it a little bit bigger, invert the mask, and then just shove that all back in the head. Shove, 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 and smooth it a little bit. Now I'm just going to pull this up. Ultimately, I'm going to attach the eyelids and the head, but I keep it until the very last moment. So the eyelids will be attached at the very end. So just moving stuff around with the grab brush, which is the greatest brush of all. Because the greatest brush of all. And now it's time, I think, for the hair. Let's see. So now we're going to do the amazing hair trick. And this was a pain to figure out, but I think I came up with a pretty decent procedural way to do this crazy hair that he has. So first, I'm going to apply that so I can shape the hair a bit more. Before I do the crazy hair, I'm going to just kind of get the basic shape to be okay. So now that I have a bit more geometry, I can move it around. Ultimately, I'm going to remesh this. So now I'm going to add a displacement modifier, and I'm going to add a texture that's going to give me those large clusters in Miles's hair. So there's my displacement modifier. At first, it looks ridiculous, I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to add a texture. First, I press plus, and that's going to give me a texture. The texture I'm going to choose is Voronoi, which is like these kind of small dot things. And depending on how I set it, it will give me larger kind of clumps. So I'm turning it on right now, and you see that it's very crazy. But if I turn the strength down to, I think I did it as minus zero point 0.2, because it's actually at the negative, that means it pushes it out. And I add a subdivision surface modifier, and I put it on top of the displacement. The subdivision has to go on top of the displacement because it means that the mesh is going to be subdivided and then displaced. So that's what I did. And I probably put it higher to give more resolution so it could displace more accurately and more detailed. And I also just turned off the smooth, the auto smooth. It's just smooth now. So now I'm going back to my Voronoi modifier, and I'm moving it around the size of the dots. And that's what gives me the clumps. So I'm kind of looking at his hair, and I'm trying to do the larger clumps right now. And I find a size which looks okay. And now if I go to this color section and I adjust the contrast, I can basically, it's the contrast of the black and white. So it shows how much those balls are pushed out and how much they're not. So I kind of left it at a medium contrast, about 0.66, 0.7 kind of thing. I guess I figured that was be okay. So now I'm going to go back to my displacement modifier, turn that off for a second, and I'm going to add a second displacement modifier. The first one was for the large clumps. The second one is for the general texture of the hair. So I'm going to add a new texture. First, I'm going to turn it off first. And I'm going to add a new texture. And this one is not the Voronoi. It's going to be the clouds texture. So first what I'm doing is I'm actually naming this texture. I think I called it large for the large clumps. There we go, large. I'm naming that's the big clumps. And now I'm pressing this, which makes a duplicate. And I should have called it small, but I just forgot. Now it's still called large. And I use the clouds texture. The clouds is basically like a noise texture. So if I turn this on now and I select the clouds texture, the large, this one, now I can start to figure out how big it's going to be. And the smaller it is, the smaller the little clumps. And obviously you see that's giving the basic hair texture. I can up the contrast to make it more, the bumps more sticking out. And I'm just changing the size here. Now I realize at this point that I really need to just remesh this thing because it wasn't giving me a great result. So I'm going to remesh it in a moment. First, I'm just checking the strength. I probably figured out where I'm going to have it. And if I change the mid-level, that actually changes how much it's pushed out. So what I'm doing now, right now, before anything, is I'm going to remesh this. And it gives me a much more even result because the polygons were pulled out on the side. That's why it looked weird. Now I have to just change the size of this texture because obviously now it's too small. So I put back on my, oh no, I guess I figured it was okay. I put back on my clumps, and now I have the large clumps and the basic hair texture. Now, I don't really want the clumps everywhere because Miles only has them at the top part of his hair. So what I have to do is weight paint. What I'm going to do is that displacement, the first one, I'm going to use a vertex group, which is going to be this. And first what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint, I'm going to turn on the weight, and I'm going to paint all the areas red or with the full weight that I want to have the large clumps. So this is all the top of Miles's head has to have those large clumps. And I guess symmetry wasn't working for me, so I just did it old school. So all of this area is going to have the large clumps, and then wherever it's blue is going to have just the small fine texture. So now I turn the weight all the way down, and I basically paint zero weight, or I guess blue, on all the areas that should not have any clumps. It doesn't may have any effect now because the displacement is not turned on to the vertex group, but it will, you'll see in a second. Once I finish doing this, I think, there we go. I select in this large one, the vertex group that I just made. First of all, switch to UVs. No, I said that's not good. Keep it local. Turn on that vertex group. And all of a sudden, look at that. Now, everywhere that I put as a green or as a blue has no clumps. And so I can basically very precisely figure out where those large clumps are. So on his hairline, there's no big clumps because that's where the hair is starting. And I just kind of go around and then I'm going to give it a couple smooths. Probably go and smooth that a couple times to diffuse the difference. And now if you see when I go back to object mode, it looks much, much better. It looks more like Miles's hair. Look at that. It's flatter on the sides because now it just has those clumps. And now I kind of just play with the settings a little bit. I think I changed the mid level, which just means basically what it's going to displace at. If the mid level is 0.5, it means medium gray. I'm just playing with these mid levels because that gives me volume on the clumps or on the regular part. So I'm just playing with the strength. I guess I figured I'd look better with 0.3. And I'm probably going to change a little bit the size just to kind of go back. And I think I just end up going back with what I was before. So this just shows you that just playing with those different parameters can give you different looks. And it worked great to make this kind of a quick version of Miles's hair. It's not perfect, but it's still at least pretty good for something that took about 5 to 6 minutes. All right, now the brows. I am going into sculpt mode and masking off his brows. And this is going to be extracted, and I'm going to have a brow shape. And Miles's brows in the movie are really simple. They're not really there's not a lot of texture on them. They're just kind of like brows. So I'm just basically going to extract these very simple brow shapes. Just kind of refining this mask a little bit. And then I'm going to extract it. I notice it's too pointy, so I shave a little bit off the top. This is just by using control. And I guess once I'm okay with it, I go to mask and I go to mask extract and I accept it. I just take the default settings. Now I have eyebrows, which are based on the mask that I made. And I push them a little bit forward on the Y axis. So they're in front of the head. Now they're kind of cruddy. So I just go with my smooth brush and I just smooth out the sculpture a little bit. So there we go, smoothing it out a little bit. And then I'm just using the grab brush to kind of refine the position of them. His brows always kind of go up a little bit in the inner corners. He always looks like a little bit quizzitive, like, oh, what's going on? Even when he's trying to be slick, he kind of has like a, hey, what's going on? Like his eyebrows kind of go up in the middle parts. And I definitely adjust it after. But for now, I'm just going to put some color on this thing so I can actually see what's going on here. So I think at this point, I decided to assign materials to all the different parts so I could actually see what it looked like with different colors. So I guess I just called that dark. And now I selected the hair and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to give it probably the same dark color. Just so I could see what things look like with different colors. Now the base color, I just kept it monochromatic for now. I don't know what I had, some other group, so I just I eliminated whatever that was. And I do the same thing for the lids and everything like that. Because remember, the lids are still separate. So I renamed that medium. There we go. And later on, I'm going to switch all of these colors to actual, real colors. But I think I'm just using this as sort of a uh, proof of concept to make sure that it looks okay. So I just linked the materials so that it's the same thing. And now for the eyes, now I'm going to assign different materials for the different parts of the eye. So to do this, first of all, I turn the bevel off, go into edit mode, and you literally select whatever you want, and then I can assign different materials to this. So this is the iris, obviously. Go to the materials here, put a new material, and I'm going to, I guess I'm just going to probably have a darker kind of a gray or something like that. And I'm going to assign that to that iris. And now I'm going to invert the mask, make another material, make a scleral color, maybe a little bit darker than that, and assign it to that. And now I'm going to select the pupil and make another color and assign it to that and make it probably very dark, kind of a black. And so now I have, some basic, um, and I call it, I was trying to write the word pupil, but I guess it was late and I don't know what I'm doing. No, it's 3:26 p.m. I'm fine. So now I just renamed everything, sclera, iris, so I can know what these things are. And now at least I have some different colors in the face, so it's easier for me to judge with different colors. And very momentarily, I'll replace all these colors with actual shaders. And I guess I do it right now, apparently. So his hair is kind of like a very dark brown. I did something, and I later on kind of made it look better. But for now, the roughness is too much. Now I'm trying to just playing with trying to figure out what his essential skin color is going to be. But then I'm going to vertex paint it later on. But for now, I'm just kind of trying to find a base color that will be okay. You can see the roughness is way too high. There we go. I'm like looking at it like it's super shiny. And now these eyes. Now his scleras, the whites of his eyes, are not white. Nobody's whites are white, especially when you have darker skin. Your irises, your scleras are also darker. Now I'm taking the pupil. It just made it black, and now his uh, irises are kind of light. I think it's like his mom has lighter eyes in the thing. So I made it way too green here. Later on, I take it and I actually make it the proper color. But this is so he looks kind of weird now. All right. And now what I'm doing is I'm duplicating the eyes. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to make the transparent shells for the eyes. First of all, I'm going to get rid of those shape keys because I don't need them. And because I made these extra edge loops, I have to merge by distance to get rid of that. Now you see it looks okay. This is going to be just a clear shell. So, and it's kind of overlapping, but we'll fix that after. Let's see how we're going to add the clear shell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mixed shader because I'm going to make two shaders, a transparent and a glass, and I'm going to mix them together. And in fact, you can just pretty much get rid of this principal BSDF. So attach the mixed shader to the surface. Now I'm going to add a glass BSDF, which is going to be, there we go, which is going to be in one of the shaders, and a transparent BSDF. Not translucent, but transparent. So if I put this in, it just makes it completely transparent. It gives it no gloss. And that's the mix. And it's going to be mostly transparent with a little bit of the gloss from the glass shader. Now it does look very pixelated because I'm going to change something in a moment to, there we go. First of all, from dithered to blended. That's really important. Dithered gives it those little dots. We don't want that. And now I'm just giving it a little bit of shine. I'm probably going to turn up the roughness a little bit in the glass shader because it's kind of too shiny. Yep. Too much is not shiny enough, but a tiny little bit of roughness. And just adjusting it. And of course, I can always adjust it, but that gives it kind of a gloss. Now, you can also add a corneal bulge, which I didn't add, but you can always add it. So I'm taking the upper eyelid and pushing it a bit forward and a bit down so his eyes are a bit more closed and kind of relaxed, more Miles Morales kind of expression. Then I'm going to go into the actual eyes themselves, and first of all, I turned off the bevel modifier that I'd put on before because I'm going to do it manually. So no bevel modifier anymore for these eyes. So I'm going to select the outer edge of the iris and just manually bevel it, giving it, well, basically an extra 2 loops so it's a bit softer. And I'm going to there's an edge loop right next to the pupil. I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. So again, that it's a bit softer, going a very kind of simple bevel. Then I'm going to add an edge loop to the outer part of the iris, as you're going to see in a second. And the reason I'm adding these edge loops is because I want to make the outer corner of the iris darker. So I'm selecting those loops, and I'm first of all shrinking them because I noticed that the iris looked a little large. I'm just turning on proportional editing, and I'm just going to shrink this whole thing a little bit. That made the irises were too large, and that's why it looked a little bit weird. So now I'm just looking at it from there. It's kind of playing around with the size of the iris. Now I'm selecting these outer loops, and I'm going to make a darker iris material. So I'm choosing iris, and I'm duplicating it, making a new version of it. I'm going to rename it Iris Dark. And at some point, I will assign it. There you go. It's assigned now to all those outer ones. And so now if I take this base color and darken it, I have what's called the limbus, which is the darker ring around the iris. So now I decide that I don't want to just have one flat color for this lighter part of the iris. I want to actually have a sort of a gradation. And I'm just going to paint it with vertex colors. So what I have to do is, first of all, I'm going to select the main part of the iris in edit mode. There we go. And then the next loop as well. So I'll grow that loop a little bit. So those two are going to be what I vertex paint. I'm going to assign that to my iris color, iris material. And I'm going to go and I'm going to duplicate this brown color by Control C, copy. Now I'm going to add a color attribute node because that's going to what's allow me to actually vertex paint. Plug it in there, it all turns white. And I go to my vertex paint tab right over there and I Control V and stick that brown color on top. So now I paint the irises and they look like they were before. I think I gave it one more subdivision level, so it's a bit more resolution. Now I go and I make a darker color. And I'm going to switch between the darker and lighter colors. Darker base and then lighter in the middle part. It'll lower the strength a little bit and it's going to be easier. Now I am just adding a bit more of a brighter color and highlighting sort of the bottom part of the iris, as we see. And I'm just noticing, though, that the pupil got kind of large because of the fact that I have the subdivision surface, and it made the black part overlap onto the brown part. So I put an extra edge loop in there to tighten it up, like a support loop, and that shrinks down the size of the pupil a little bit. All right, I'm going to go back to vertex paint and do a bit of a darker color on top to kind of simulate sort of a shadow. The top part of the iris is usually kind of in shadow, and then I just kind of emphasize I sort of blend off the limbus, the darker part, with the actual lighter part of the iris. Okay, now what I'm going to be doing is now that I say, okay, the color seems to be okay, I'm going to play with some adjustments. I'm going to add a hue, saturation, and lightness node to my vertex color, or brightness contrast, in fact. I'm going to pump up the contrast a tiny bit. It really makes a huge difference. The contrast is really strong. It affects it very strongly. So a very small amount of contrast makes a huge difference. And then I am going to brighten it up a little bit. All right, now let's get to the eyelids. I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier on both the top and bottom eyelids because I need more resolution when I mesh it to the head, when I remesh it. So 2 levels of subdivision surface on the top, and I eventually will push the subdivision surface modifier on top of the solidify modifier. That's very important to keep the crisp edge. Select the bottom one, and I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm going to add another subdivision surface modifier with 2 levels onto the bottom lid, and then I will drag it on top of the solidify, which I don't think is in the video, but do it. Drag it on. The subdivision surface should be on top of the solidify modifier. And now I've joined the two lids together. You didn't see that. I selected them both and did Control J. That's why they're linked. I'm putting a little bit more solidify there. And now I'm going to convert that into a mesh, basically applying the modifiers. Now I selected the eyelids, I selected the head, Control J, and now the eyelids and the head are joined, and I'm going to remesh it at a pretty low resolution. I mean, a pretty high resolution, low voxel size, 0.002 in this case. And that's going to preserve all the details. And it's a pretty dense mesh. It's about 4 million polygons, no, a little bit less. So the eyelids are now finally attached to the head, and I'm just using a bit of the clay strips to join that lid to the rest of the face so that there's not this like weird gap because the lids do kind of join. And now I'm going to be using some of the sculpting brushes, the clay brush and the draw brush. I'm using the draw brush here to make sort of like a tear duct. And I'm just using these brushes to kind of smooth everything and to kind of join the eyelids with the rest of the face. I also go to a crease brush, which I'll do in a second. A little bit of clay strips there. Clay strips just to get the tear duct. And I'll use the crease polish brush, Shift C. I'm putting on the stabilized stroke just to kind of re-emphasize that fold. And then I'm kind of smoothing that a little bit. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make the body. I'm putting on a cube and I'm putting two levels of subdivision surface on the cube to make it sort of a rounded cube, and I'm applying it. And this is going to represent basically the torso, sort of the rib cage. So I applied the transformations, turned on X symmetry, went into sculpt mode, and now I'm using my grab brush to just basically shape this thing into sort of a torso, rib cage. I'm going to add shoulders after, but first I'm just kind of shaping the basic rib cage and moving it there. And I notice that it's way too wide because I do have to add shoulders. So I'm looking at his kind of extremely thin waist, and I'm probably going to make it thinner. Oh no, in fact, I make it even wider. I push that up a bit, move the shoulders a bit in. Right. So now I'm going to add some spheres, which are going to be my shoulders. And because of making all of this body kind of modularly, it just makes it easier that I can move pieces around. So there we go. Do all these movements in object mode. I set the transformations, apply the transformation, and then I put a mirror modifier. And now I just set it again for some reason. Here's my cylinder, and that's going to be used for the upper arms, like the humors. So I'm just moving this around. I decided I'm going to go to the other side for some reason. And this becomes my upper arms. And so now I can move all these pieces around. I'll apply this, apply the transformations, and now I can go to edit mode because I set the mirror modifier. And I can move them around by pressing Alt Q, go between the different pieces. So just kind of, I think I stretch out the arms a little bit on the Z axis, or I shrink them everywhere except for the Z axis. And then I can move around the shoulders a little bit. And then I'm going to duplicate these upper arms and make lower arms, which I really end up cutting off. I just use it so I can see what's going on. Oh, stretching out the torso a little bit. Right. Oh, I move the arms a little bit back. And I think now I'm going to duplicate them. There we go. And I'm going to use them as forearms, which I pretty much cut off after. But it gives me a better idea when I have the forearms. So even if you're not using the forearms because it's a bust, sometimes it helps to just see them there. Shrinking that wrist area. All right. And now I think I'm going to select everything, object convert to mesh to basically apply the modifiers. And now I'm going to join them, Control J. And I'm still going to keep they're not remeshed yet. All the pieces are still separate. So I'm just kind of moving stuff around, and then eventually I will remesh it at some point. Probably some point soon, kids. Let us see. I think there we go. We're going to remesh it. And now I've remeshed it. I'm smoothing this general shape here. And then I'm going to kind of be able to work on it. Now, I guess it's a few minutes after. I guess I turned it off and forgot to turn it back on again. But I'm still working on the basic shape, and I'm just stretching out the lats. And because it's hard to move the lats, what I do is I just mask them, smooth the mask, invert it, and now I can pull out the lats without affecting the arms, just to make his body a bit wider. And now I have this kind of basic shape. I'm cutting off the bottom of it because I don't need it, smoothing it a little bit, and then pushing on that weird plate back, and then remeshing it again, and then smoothing it again, and remeshing it again. Now I'm going to start to work on sort of I guess, the anatomy in some very quick way because it's not really much. So here I'm emphasizing the pecs, the clavicles, the deltoids of the shoulder muscles. This is obviously sped up because it was really boring. Now, for the anatomy, I usually use the draw brush, the clay strips brush, and the flattened contrast brush to kind of give planes. Okay, so I'm pushing his armpits up a little bit. And here I'm drawing the separate where the bicep ends with the stabilized stroke to make kind of more of a straight line. So now I'm just going to be working the basic anatomy all over the place, carving in the where the triceps are, separation of the pecs, working under the pecs, a little bit of bicep, and it looks very exaggerated now, but I'm going to smooth everything out once I remesh it. And the scapula on the back, the groove in the upper on the back, teres major, and I just remeshed it. So now I'm going to kind of smooth this out because obviously this is just the suit, so it shouldn't be that defined. Now I'm using a clay strips to add a bit more of the anatomy. Serratus major on the side, those finger muscles, which they love in comic books. More on the deltoid, the clavicle. Oh, it brought his pecs down a little bit. More on the triceps and the back and the teres major. There we go. And I added a bit of more lats on the back, defining the deltoid. And, oh, the acromion process. Well, for about 1 second. Just refining it, and I made his waist a little bit thinner to match the concept. Now I realize I need to make him a turtleneck for the top of the suit. So I'm going and masking off the neck of the actual head, and I'm extracting it in the same way that we did the eyebrows. So I've extracted this neck. So it's going to be like the neck of the suit. I'm making it big for no apparent reason. Now I go into sculpt mode, and first thing is I want to give it a bit more thickness. And now I apply the modifier, and now I remesh it. Apply it before you remesh it so you don't get weird results. Now I'm going to chop off the top, face sets from visible, remesh it, and just kind of smooth it. And remesh it again, push this back. And I'm going to attach this thing to the rest of the head. So where I'm trying to find it, I think. There it is, mesh. And I just move it up and basically I'm going to attach, I'm going to join this with the body in a moment. I'll get it sort of some reasonable shape. Then sculpt mode, get rid of that. Make the neck a little bit thinner because I noticed the neck on the real head has to be thinner. And then I go and I basically join the body and the neck. Control J and remesh this whole thing. And now it's all one piece. So now the neck, the sort of turtleneck thing is part of the suit. And I think I just chopped the top of the neck off to make it a bit cleaner. And I'm just kind of finishing that up. So there's like the suit. It looks not great, but you'll see it and I smoothed it a little bit. And now I'm just kind of right at the end, just emphasizing some of the larger muscle groups so it looks better when I have the suit texture and stuff like that. All right. Now I'm basically preparing for making the texturing of the suit. Oh, hey, look, I even made a little bit of a sternal notch. Look at that. I guess I was going crazy. A little bit more traps, a little more lats, and there we go. All right. Now, oh, I added a little bit of clay strips just to define the pecs a little bit more, so it just looked a little bit more heroic. And a little bit more triceps too. This is all just with the clay strips. Now, what I'm going to be doing momentarily is to actually remesh this whole thing. The reason I'm remeshing it in a moment, but I'm not remeshing it with the remesh, I'm going to use what's called quad remesher. First of all, I'm just giving a basic black look so I can just see if this looks okay. And I say, okay, this looks okay. I'm going to use an add-on called quad remesher. It's a paid add-on, but it's incredibly great. And I'm going to make a low poly version of this torso. Now, if you know how to use it, you'll know what I'm doing. If you don't, you can watch a video, but this is basically the low poly version of what I just made. But because it's so low poly, now I can actually have pretty decent edge flow and I can UV this thing. So what I'm doing first of all is I'm just selecting these loops and I'm going to delete them. Not that one, but all these loops like that. And I'm just going to end up deleting those kind of plates, as you'll see. So I deleted those edges, and now I can select all these little plate things and just get rid of them. And now I have basically the suit. Now I can actually select some seams to make my UVs. And the reason I'm making UVs is because I'm going to use texture painting to make this suit so I can have the Spider-Man logo. So I'm just checking this. Oh, I guess that's not a good seam. It's not perfect edge flow, but it's okay for what this is. And get rid of that one, do that one, and basically just make loops going all the way through. Now I can make those, mark them as seams, select the whole thing, and unwrap angle based. And now in my UV editing, I have these two gigantic pieces. I'll just rotate them 90 degrees. So it'll be just kind of a little bit easier for my texture painting, though it doesn't really matter, but for this demo. And then I just realign those pieces by rotating them. Okay, and now just the fastest UV layout ever made. All right, there's my UV layout. It was very fast. So now what we're going to do is I can go into shading, and I'm going to start to build the shader for the build the texture for the shirt. So I'm creating a new image. I'm going to put it at a 2K image, 2048. This is a new image that I'm going to use to make the Spider-Man texture. So I have my 2K texture map. Now I'm in the texture paint zone. And Miles's suit is not black, and the natural color you get from the map is black. So I have to make it kind of a dark blue. So I'm selecting a color, trying to find a good color, and I'm using the paint bucket tool to just fill the whole thing. Although I kind of like that, and I make it a bit more darker, and I guess I settle with that. Now it's time to make the actual Spider-Man logo. So we go to the paint tab, or the paint on the left, the brush, and we go to texture. I've opened up, this is the paint tab, and I have to add a new texture. So first of all, I'm going to select stencil, and I select new. And then I go down to that checkerboard on the bottom, and I have to load in the Miles Morales logo that I found online. So I go and find it on my computer. I'll upload that for everybody because it's a pretty good file. And there we go, the kind of spray painted Spider-Man logo. Now it appears on the texture, and then while I'm doing this, something weird happens. So I just reload it up into that little texture window. And you'll see I go and I click on it and I just basically find the texture that I just made. So it was there. There we go. And then I'm going to switch it. The mapping, it's very important that we switch the mapping to, it says view plane. That doesn't work. We need to put it to stencil. So you see right there, mapping at stencil. When I do that, the stencil now appears. Okay, so by right-clicking the mouse, I move around the stencil. That's right-clicking. Pressing Shift makes it go smaller or bigger. What I'm doing now is I'm just adjusting the value of the color. That's all that matters is how bright or how dark it is. So if it's really bright, the stencil is going to be bright. It's going to be bright red because the stencil's red. If it's dark, it's going to be a darker red. So I give it a couple of tries, and I realize that it's probably too dark at first. And I'm going to come back, and now I made it white. And you're going to see what happens when the color is white. It's very intense. It's too intense. So I gray it down a little bit. Remember that it's only the value that makes a difference for this stencil. So I kind of put it a medium gray. I got it to hopefully the right position, and I'm just literally just painting on top of it with this kind of medium gray, and that gives it what I think is a pretty decent value. Now, by the way, I'm going to use this texture map later, not for the colors, but for just the basically as a mask. You'll see that when I build the shader. But for now, I have this dark blue suit and this red Spider-Man. So I have my basic costume. Now I believe it is time for me to actually paint the face properly. All we have now is a base color. We're going to add a color attribute node, and we're going to do the face similar to how we did the iris using vertex colors. But first, I'm going to add a color palette, a paint palette. Go to extensions. You need an internet connection and write paint palette. And this is a great little thing because it allows us to store a bunch of colors there for painting. And it works for vertex paint, for texture paint, for anything really. So first I'm going to show you how to find this paint palette. If we go to the right, or we just press N, or that little thing. It looks ridiculous now because the natural color is black, but we'll change that. That is, we go to the bottom and we have color palette. Now I already have a color palette, so I'm just getting rid of it. I'm going to show you how to make a new one. Right, so we have our vertex paint thing. And first of all, I'm going to take that original base color and copy it, Control C. I copied the base color that we had, and I'm going to paste it onto my palette. So if I put that plus over there and I do Control V, now I have the color that we did. And now I'm going to show you how to select the colors. Shift, here we go, hold on, put on the screencast keys. Shift X, and that gives you a little eyedropper. And if I hover over any color, it selects those colors. So you say selecting the green and stuff. I'll go back to my little paint palette here, press Shift X, and sample that. And now if you see the vertex paint color is sampled that color. So now we have, I just kind of isolated the head. And now I'm just basing the whole thing out. And I'm cranking up the light because it's a bit too dark to see what I'm doing. So I just based out the head with exactly the same color we used before. Now I'm going to make a pinkish color for the lips and stuff. So I'm adding a new color with that plus. I'm just copying and pasting, Control V. But now I'm going to take that color and make it more pink. So now this is going to be sort of a lip color. I'm just adjusting it. Now I'm going to go Alt X, or sorry, Shift X, and select that color. But I don't want it to be full strength, so I'm turning down the strength of the brush. And it's probably not strong enough, so I probably turn it up a bit. Yep. And I'm being kind of sloppy, as you see. I should be a lot more careful with what I'm doing, and I end up going over his lip line. But it's okay. Now what I do is I sort of darken the color a little bit because I thought it was too garish, too pink. Now I'm going to go all Shift X and just sample the base color and just go over my little mistake there. Just paint over the regular skin color back on. Or you could just be more careful at the beginning. Now that I've done that, and I really should be making a new color, but instead what I do is I take the lip color and I make it slightly darker and more purple. And this is going to be sort of the darker part that goes right after the flesh part, between the flesh and the pinky part. On darker skin, it's usually a little bit darker. So I probably pump up the strength a little bit. Yep. And this is kind of a darker purple that you see on, well, you always have it, but the darker your skin is, the more obvious that darker color is. And now, the problem with the vertex paintbrushes is that there's no good smooth in vertex paint. So the solution is, if you go to sculpt mode and you go to select the paintbrushes, there's this thing called blend soft, and it works amazing. And I don't know why it's not in vertex paint. So I switched to sculpt mode and use the blend soft thing and then just soften it. It works great. Turn the roughness up a little bit so it wasn't so shiny. So now I'm just using this blend soft and kind of blending the lip color. And I'm going to be going between the vertex paint and the sculpt mode so I can just use that nice brush. Back to vertex paint. I'm making the ears a little bit more pink, more reddish, going on the back of the ear. I keep moving the light around so I can see what I'm doing. That's the rotation just to see. There we go. Now I can see what I'm doing. And I go back to my sculpt mode and take my little blending brush, my soft blend, and go back to vertex paint so I can select that color. So I'm selecting the base color and I'm just going over the high points of the ear with the base color. Now you notice I screwed up. I didn't select the base color. So remember, Shift X. So I select that base color and I'm just going over the high points of the ears so that those parts are less pink. Now back to the pink. Put the strength up a little bit and I'm just giving a bit more reddishness on his nose and his cheeks. It was a bit too much, so I undid it. And once I did that, I'm going to switch back to my sculpt mode and blend it. And I'm sure there is a better blend way in vertex paint, but I haven't figured it out yet. All right, back to my regular color, and I just unpinked it a bit. Now I'm going to add a new color. I duplicate my original color, and now I'm making a darker brown color because Miles is obviously not this light. So I am basically painting, selected it with Shift X, painting on this darker color on pretty much everywhere except for the highlighted areas. So his neck, his head, his forehead, sort of the sides of his face. And it looks very cruddy now, but I'm going to, I adjusted a bit to make it a bit more red, resampled it. And it looks really cruddy, but of course I'm going to go back to sculpt mode and blend it with that amazing blend soft brush. I'm also darkening up around the eyes quite a lot. And here you go. I'm kind of emphasizing the eyelids because they're usually darker. Now I'm back to sculpt mode, big brush, and just blend soft. And I'm just blending all this stuff. And that gives it a more dark complexion. Now I'm using a bit of that darker color on the low points of his ears, sort of the shadowy parts. And I even go over the edge of the lips, like inside of the lips, again, to give it that kind of darker line. There you go. And I blend it, of course. And there you go. If you have darker skin, you know that it's a little bit more contrasty. The darker your skin is, the more obvious the contrast is between those areas. Okay. Now I just went back to my soft brush and sculpt mode, and I just gave a bit more dark color on here and there. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to make a highlight color. So another one of the other color, duplicate that base color and make it more orangey and kind of saturated. And that's going to be used for the high points, the nose above the brow. See, it's kind of a more of an orangey color. That part of the cheeks near the nose, and it gives it just a bit of a more of a richness, so he doesn't look ashy. Blending that, and now I'm back to seeing what it looks like with everything. Blending it a little bit more, and a bit more pinkishness here and there. I see his nose needs a bit more pink, so I'm giving his nose a bit more pink. Or it's not really pink, it's kind of a mauve. And now I'm going to go and go back to my shading tab, and I'm going to adjust the colors in a kind of a larger way. I'm going to bring up my color attribute, which is where all the vertex color is, and I'm going to look at the reference a little bit. I have this kind of picture of him. He looks very shiny in this reference. And I'm going to add some modifiers or just like little nodes. And that I pumped up the saturation a bit. Now it's way too much, but if you give him a bit more saturation, he has a bit more of a rich color. So I just added a hue saturation value and gave him a bit more saturation and turned the value down so he's a little bit darker. I also am adding a brightness contrast, and I'm slightly upping the contrast. Very little. It's very powerful, the contrast. And now I noticed that when I did that, I needed to turn the saturation back down. So very slightly more contrast, just to give him more differences between the areas. All right, now I'm making a background. I'm getting ready to sort of render this thing. Huge, big plane in the back, and I'll just give it a very basic color, some kind of purplish color or something like that. And I usually turn the roughness up so it doesn't reflect light. And I even turn the index of refraction down a bit. So I'm kind of have a temporary background. And I've already set up some lights on the left and on the right. I changed the focal length, and I'm just trying to frame a shot to see what it's going to look like. So I'm kind of just getting the camera ready, framing it, seeing how it's going to look. And then I can notice a few things once I start to frame it. Changing the color of the lights a little bit, so there's kind of a reddish color, I guess, on that left. And I think I make the color there more orangey, just to give it like a side light or a backlight. Kind of a rim light, in fact, is the word. So on the left, I'm giving it a cool light. On the right, I'm giving it a warm light. So now I'm just tweaking the face a little bit. I'm just making him look a little bit more smiley, pulling down the middle of his lips, pulling up the corner of his lips. And I'm taking a little draw brush, a little draw sharp brush, and just kind of emphasizing his little smile. And I already pushed his lower eyelids up at the corner, so he looks like he's more smiling. Now I'm adjusting the position of his eyes because it looked lame to have him look forward, so I want to have him look to the side. So first, what I have to do is I'm applying all the shape keys on those eyes because I have to now apply the mirror modifier so I can move them independently. I am applying all the shape keys on both outer and inner eyes. Now I apply the mirror. And now they're two independent eyes. I do the same thing there. Apply the mirror. And now I'm going to select both the outer and inner eyes and go to edit mode. Now I have to make sure that my pivot point is individual origins. And see, now I can rotate the eyes. And I'm moving them to the right, to the left, and I'm trying to get a position where it looks good in the render. So I'm going to turn them to his right so that he kind of looks like he's gazing off into the distance. And I keep moving the eyes a little bit so it just looks better for the render. There you go. That looks much better. He has more expression. Now I am going to do a bump map for the suit because his suit has this kind of neoprene diving suit texture, which I'm doing. And this is kind of complicated. So what I'm going to do here is after I attach it, I'm going to now show you the node setup that I used to give this result, which you see here. So what it is you have this Voronoi texture to make those bumps. So I'm going to show you the nodes. First of all, I have all these nodes for the color to separate the blue and the red Spider-Man thing. So this here is just the map that we made before. I did put some red under his arms. But that's the coloring map we made before when we did the texture paint. I turned the saturation all the way down so it's black and white. I bumped up the contrast like crazy, as you'll see, because I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like without that. And those are the two colors, the purple for the suit and the red for the Spider-Man. So now I'm going to kind of manipulate these things, and you're going to see what happens. If I start to if the saturation goes back up, you don't see a difference. So I turn the saturation off so it's really a black and white map, Spider-Man and nothing. And the contrast helps it separate the Spider-Man logo from the background. So I pumped up the contrast like crazy. So now there's a difference between the Spider-Man logo and the blue. The red and the blue are separated. Now, in this mix color node, I have the purple and the red, really just two colors. And the map is creating the factor, which is basically what decides what's red and what's purple. Now, of course, I could change the colors if I want to, but I kept them like, the Miles Morales Spider-Man color. Now the bump. This is what's going to make the bumpy stuff on the suit and what's going to make the Spider-Man not bumpy, because the Spider-Man logo isn't bumpy. So we have to see what's going on here. So first of all, I have exactly the same the map is just plugged directly into the factor. This is the same thing. I just pulled the color and plugged it into another mixed color node, which is plugged into a bump map. See, that's the bump. It goes into a normal, and in the bump is plugged into a mixed color node, and that map is the factor, exactly the same as before with the color. But now it's separating the Spider-Man area and the bumpy area. And for the bumps, I use this Voronoi texture. I used Node Wrangler. UV is plugged into the vector, and I changed the scale of the X values, which makes it a bit more elongated. And for the Voronoi, I put it on Manhattan, which just looked better. And the scale, I did it about 75, which depends on the size of your model. But here, the 75 scale worked okay. And then I turned the random completely down. The random makes it kind of irregular. Then I set the brightness and contrast like this, and you'll see why in a second. And the strength and the distance just show like that's what kind of makes the effect. So I'm going to kind of play with these the node setup, and you'll see what happens when you change things. So this X scale is because without it, they look too square. So the X scale just makes it look less square. The scale is literally just the scale of these bumps. So at about 75 for this model was okay. And the randomness, if I put it up, it looks kind of more organic, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to look quite kind of regular. Now the brightness and contrast just changes the look of it a bit. If I make it less bright, you just see the ridges. So I kind of kept it so you just see a little bit more of the ridges. And the contrast doesn't make that much of a difference. So I kept it at whatever that was, 0.2 or something like that. And that's plugged into A, and then B is where the Spider-Man is. So there's no bumps on the Spider-Man. The red color is B. So I just kept it on white because that pushes the Spider-Man logo up, making it look like it's kind of ironed on or something like that. And there is our render. There's our Miles there with all of our stuff on. And I'm going to take a nice render of this image. Takes a few seconds, and there we go. There's Miles. Miles final render. And there we go. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been useful for you, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.